James chapter 1. I don't have that catchy of a title for this morning because the Word just kind of gives it to us. I just simply came up with Be Doers of the Word. It's hard to get much different than that for the passage, just be doers of the Word. I kind of wanted to call it Nike, just do it. Figured I'd get hit with some copyright on Facebook at some point, but that's what we're going with, okay? So just do the Word, just do what it says. James chapter 1. We're going to look at it in three different sections. So we're going to look at verses 19 through 20 to start. We're going to do that, and I'm going to stay put. I like to get animated and move around. We'll see how that works. Please look with me, James chapter 1, verse 19 through 20. It says, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore, put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls." I lied and told you 19 and 20. I wanted to look at the next verse as well. Verse 19 and verse 20 and 21. James opens this section of his letter. It seems like it's fragmented, but it's a continuation of all that we've heard before. But there is a shift here. He talks about trials and temptations. He talks about seeking God for wisdom. He talks about temptation and talks about not being deceived. And we continue on with this theme by focusing on key aspects as to how we are to behave or how to be countercultural in a world that says, do the opposite of these things. James says, quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. If you are honest with yourself, like I am with myself, I am the opposite of all three of those things. I am quick to get angry. I am quick to speak into things. And sometimes I am slow to hear. Not always. I'm admitting that to you so you can feel comfortable admitting it to yourself in the seat. Ask my wife. She will tell you I am all three of those things at any given time. But James has this countercultural response. And I think it's interesting in our culture of just sheer outrage. Everybody and their mother has an opinion about something. It is right. They have to say it first. They don't want to hear what you have to say, and you don't want to hear what they have to say because we're all right in our own way, right? And we can talk a big picture, we can talk culture, but James says let every person, it's individualized. Being quick to hear means that we would rather hear somebody else's side of the story and insight before we try to give our own opinions and speak into that. Slow to speak means that we don't chime in until we have fully grasped the details of the situation. I don't care if it's an argument. I don't care if it's a conversation. Being quick to hear means I want to know the details to the problems, and I'm going to wait to speak into them. You guys know so many of us have answers to the problems that we haven't even heard yet, right? Like, I can give you an answer to the problem that you haven't told me, just because I know it all and I just understand that I'm going to have the right answer. And in the middle of that, he also says be slow to anger, which means that sometimes we have to separate our emotions and our feelings from the moment and able to speak wisely into a situation. I don't know if you've ever been in an argument with your spouse. I'm sure none of you have done that because that never happens in marriage, ever. But you know how many problems occur just from miscommunication and quick tongues because we are not willing to listen to the whole side of the story? And it doesn't have to be just a spouse relationship. It's any conversation in general. If my advice to you precedes the problem you lay out for me, it's probably wrong. Yet so many of us want to speak. We want to be heard. Our emotions get riled up when they're not. And so our pride often overwhelms our humility in the fact that when I speak, I want to be right. I want you to know that I'm right. And I don't particularly care about the direness of your situation. I just want to help you fix it. And as Christians, we're called to be different from that. I mean, you can look at every situation and every problem. You can think of a million examples in your head right now where human beings are about the exact opposite of what James is laying out. And that doesn't always mean that in every single instance you get angry when you hear something you disagree with. It doesn't always mean that you're a bad listener. What it means is there should be this intentionality behind what we're doing. If I listen to somebody with my phone out, I'm not engaged in the conversation. If I speak into a solution, or if I speak a solution into a problem, it probably reveals I'm more impatient and I don't really care about your situation all that much. And as believers, if we want to bridge the gap between those who need to hear Christ, we have to demonstrate a capacity and a willingness to listen and engage and be loving. It doesn't always mean that saying something impulsively is wrong. It doesn't always mean that being angry over something is wrong. There is a right kind of anger. There is a right kind of, well, I need to say something before this goes off the rails here. There are situations where that works, but by and large, we don't do what James has called us to do. And so why is this relevant to the book of James? And why is it relevant to what he's going to talk about further? Well, if you look at verse 20, he says, after slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. There are lots of ways to be righteously angry. You should be righteously indignant at injustices in the world. That reveals a heart of God in you. We want murderers to be punished for murder. That is right. But far too often, our anger and the default emotion of anger becomes, I feel wronged, I am frustrated and irritated that you have wronged me or that life has wronged me, and this is going to be my focus. Anger is this default emotion where we want to lash out. The problem is that anger is incredibly difficult to restrain. God's anger is perfect, but in our own minds, once anger takes hold, it's very difficult for us to keep that in a healthy check. We just let it simmer, and it simmers until it boils over. And so he equates this anger to filthiness. Verse 21, it says, therefore put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. Now, if any of you are carrying around a study Bible, or you've read this passage, or you've studied it before, the word put away can literally mean to take one's clothes off, to strip one's clothes off. You know, when you get home from work and you're in your slacks and your dress shirt, you just want to put your PJs on. Like that feeling. They come off, give me something comfortable. In reality, what James is saying is your wickedness, the sinfulness that pervades your life, the pride, the anger, the impulsiveness, and the frustration for other people must be stripped away completely. It's not just I'm going to work on a little piece. I'm going to simply just try to do a little bit better here and there. It's a removal of wickedness and filthiness in your life. And he ties this to anger because anger is reflective of the pride in our souls that is so often, I've been wronged and somebody else should suffer. He says, put that away. We have a contrast between this wickedness. We have a contrast between the filthiness. We have a contrast between putting something off and then receiving the implanted word. So we put away wickedness and we receive the implanted word. And when we read and receive the word, we're actually able to shed this sin in our lives. And so many of us may be sitting here today trying to evaluate what it is that we need to put away. And in reality, what God is demanding and what James is calling for is perfection. Put it all away. Be perfect and holy like Christ. That's the goal. But you cannot obtain that because you are a sinner. And without Christ and without the Word, you don't have the ability to shed those things. Only Christ does. And the Spirit working through you and the Spirit working through the Word helps us to restrain our tongues when it is difficult to restrain. It helps us restrain our anger when all we want to do is punch somebody in the face. I know none of you want to punch people in the face. Verse 21, again, we're looking at 22 through 25. We see a section, our first section, I didn't even tell you what the title was, maybe it was above my head, is that God's Word produces righteousness. God's Word produces righteousness. In our second section, God's Word demands action. This should be all too familiar to you. You've probably heard it. If you've been in church at any point in your life, you have heard this section. But verse 22 says, "But be doers of the Word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the Word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away, and at once forgets what he was like. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing." God's Word demands action because it is only Bible-saturated believers who do the works of the Word. How we expect to do the Word without knowing the Word is beyond me. But we have that default approach so many times. If I just kind of come and if I just hear a little bit about it, then I'll just be able to do it. And week in and week in, after week out, we come and we listen to sermons, we hear people speak, but we don't intently get into the Word ourselves. We don't study with the heart to receive it. We just study with the heart to check off a box. I heard the sermon this week, I must be holier, right? A lot of people hear the Word and they like to hear the Word, but they don't do the Word. You know why that is? Because it's easy. It's easy to hear the Word. It's not easy to do the Word. But just like anything in life, if you don't do something, it doesn't amount to anything. I just told the students this morning, you can listen to your math teacher for the next 2 months, and if you never do any homework and expect to ace the test, good luck. And we know that to be true. So why don't we apply it to our own reading? How can we expect to be holy? How can we expect to restrain our lips? How can we expect to be anything like Christ if we ignore His Word? And that says, let every person be quick to hear. It's because it's individualized. This whole message is for every one of you in here. It's for every believer that walks the face of the earth. They need to understand that there is personal responsibility in taking up the Word and applying it in your own life. I got this quote from Ronald Blue in his commentary in James. I love this, and I'm going to steal it. Sorry, dude, but I'm stealing it. "The growing numbers of sermon sippers who flit from one doctrinal desert to another like helpless hummingbirds are deceiving themselves." I like that. It stings, but I like it. Sermon sippers. It's a new phrase. Guys, your students, your parents can speak to you all day long, like, do your homework, and you know that it's a good idea to do it. But if you don't do it, it doesn't merit anything. It's the same with everything in life. We've convinced ourselves that the Word is a good thing. But a lot of times we haven't convinced ourselves that we need to plant our faces in it and actually apply it in our own life to grow. And when we treat God's Word as something that we give minimal attention and effort to, we deceive ourselves into thinking our lives are going to merit any godly fruit. And that's kind of what James expands on in this mirror analogy about doing the Word and then looking in a mirror. So I really, really like this, and I find this analogy to be even more relevant today. But in verse 23, again, it says, "If anybody is a hearer of the Word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror." for he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. Like, all of us know what a mirror is. And I looked up, like, the history of a mirror to see when, like, the first one was made. You really can't, there's an official, like, silver glassed mirror that was created in, like, the 1800s. But really, you can trace it back for thousands of years. People have used polished metals and all kinds of things to see their reflection. So for thousands of years, people have understood the concept of a mirror and have used a mirror for self-grooming purposes. Any reflective surface will do. And I find it particularly intriguing today for the simple reason that we have a heightened sense of seeing ourselves more than any previous generation in the world. We have photography and videography for ourselves available at the touch of a finger. Do you realize that Spurgeon couldn't just watch his recorded sermon online? The fact that I can hear myself is incredible. The fact I can go back and watch myself in action and see my body movements, my intonations, look at my face, and perceive me from your perspective is unbelievable. And sure, that technology has existed, since TV was created. Actors have had that ability, but every single one of you can whip out your phone right now and just say, oh, it's selfie time, and take a photo, and we can perceive ourselves. So not only do we have a mirror, but we have the ability to evaluate ourselves in a way that nobody else ever has. We live in a world where influencer is a job title, where my goal is to just help you watch me live my life, and maybe it'll help you along the way. And it's just an interesting dynamic for me to think about. And so why am I on this tangent? I say it because we use mirrors for the purpose of self-evaluation. Like, if I don't look at the mirror intently enough in the morning, I walk out of the house with a wrinkled shirt. And then my wife has to call me on it. If I just spent longer than 30 seconds looking at the mirror, I would have seen, oh, okay, I have a wrinkled shirt. I wore black today, and all I can see is fuzz on my shirt. Like, if I'd spent more time looking at it, I could have fixed it. We know that physically. We evaluate ourselves on every kind of physical way that we can. But put simply, we care more about how the world sees us than who God's Word tells us who we are and who we should be. And James calls out this idea that you're just simply looking at a mirror and just casually going on as if nothing really matters all that much. There's not a whole lot to change. There's not a whole lot to see. But he describes the Word as the perfect law in verse 25. The one who looks into the mirror of God's Word sees the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts. He will be blessed in his doing. And it's not always that people lack the ability to self-evaluate. It's that we lack the intention that the Scripture is where we should really be evaluating ourselves. I'll evaluate myself from all kinds of your perspectives of me. Dress better, eat differently, look more fit, do things that are socially acceptable. I'll align myself with all of that just because, I want to be one of you. And so we'll use a mirror in that aspect. We'll reflect and evaluate ourselves in those ways. But when it comes to God's Word, a casual glance in the Word profits nothing. And James says we have deceived ourselves. Deceived ourselves. Well, what have we deceived ourselves from exactly? Like, deceit is a reoccurring theme from verses before last week in verse 16 when Jason brought it up. It comes up again twice just in this passage. Why does it talk about believers deceiving themselves? It's just simple. It's foolish to think you can merit anything outside of the Word. And it is foolish to think that you are going to live a holier, more peaceful, more perfect, Christ-like life if the Word is not your focus and aim in the Christian walk. If that's the source of life, if that's the source of evaluation, then we have no other thing to run to than that, but we neglect it so much. But one of the biggest problems isn't just the fact that we neglect it, but the fact that we don't like what we're going to see. Because in a lot of ways, the Word is offensive. It tells you that you're not perfect just the way you are. It tells you that you're broken, in need of repair. It tells you that you have to be restored to your relationship with God through a man named Jesus Christ who died for you so that you can have a relationship with Him. I don't like to hear all of that all the time. Andrew, I just opened up the word, Andrew, you are prideful, angry, impatient, you don't listen well, you don't love people well. Okay, God, all right, chill out, man, please. A lot of times we don't pick it up because we don't like what it's going to say. We know when we look into this mirror that conviction comes with it. We know that when we look into the truth, we're confronted by all the lies in our own life. We prefer the evil queen in Snow White's approach. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Yeah, it's me, mirror, that's right. Oh, it doesn't say that at all. So we put it away. It's easy to hear the pastor preach and speak, but I don't have to do anything if I don't open it and read it, and I can live my life not confronted by conviction, and in reality not grow. And that's what James is calling deceit. But we cannot do the Word if we don't know the Word. I find it very, very interesting that James calls the law of liberty. Because the phrase, the law, immediately implies that there's a whole list of rules and codes that I have to follow. And for generations and thousands of years, really, the Jewish people up to this point had been led to believe that as long as they could just do X, Y, Z, that they were in good standing with God. As long as I can just do these things, I do the right things, I say the right things, and I look the right way, and I appear to God in the right way, that I'm really just good to go. But really, that's kind of slavery. You're just slave to a moral code. And a lot of people see the Word, like Christians and non-Christians alike, see the Bible as restrictive, not freeing. But James calls it the law of liberty, because the gospel in itself is the most freeing thing that we have. Like God's Word will produce freedom in your life that you didn't even know was possible. And yet we so frequently neglect it. We wonder why we succumb to temptations in our lives. We wonder why trials are just so difficult that we can't seem to get through them. We wonder why people aren't coming to Christ when we talk to them about it. We wonder why our prayers seem ineffective. We wonder why God doesn't change the hearts of those who are biblically ignorant. And a lot of times it's because we're neglecting the source of power that we have. And this is not a sermon to bash us all in the ways in which we have failed. It's an exhortation by James to say, guys, you as believers in this letter recognize that Jesus is Lord. But you're living in a way that doesn't say that His Word is the source of power and life in your life. And I'm trying to tell you to just do the Word. You've heard it. You've heard it from me. You've heard it from Paul. You've heard it from all these religious leaders. And in the book of Acts, you've heard these truths. Why aren't you doing these truths? And more often than not, it's just because we don't really know them. You cannot do the Word if you don't know the Word. And God's Word as this mirror, as this perfect law, it gives us the ability to objectively examine ourselves. And it provides a pathway to transformation. And this transformation reveals itself by both our private and public obedience to the Lord. So last section, in point number 3, it says God's Word reveals true religion. God's Word reveals true religion. So if anyone thinks he is religious, in verse 26, and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the Word. Now, I don't want to spend a great deal of time in verse 26, but the tongue is a primary focal point in the letter of James, which Jason will preach in chapter 3, I have no doubt. And the tongue comes up so much because in Matthew chapter 12, we are told that out of the mouth the heart speaks. Everything that we say reveals inward things about our lives. And so when it talks about bridling your tongue and the ability to tame the tongue, it's because self-control and restraint of the tongue is an example of wisdom. Because again, many of us are quick to speak. And when, I don't know about you, I'm not talented enough, when I have not spent enough time calculating what's about to come out of my mouth, it's typically not good. I am a snark machine. And I like to use the word snarky, but in reality the word could just be called rude. Snarky just sounds better. So if we don't have restraint over our tongues, what we do is we demonstrate the defilement of our soul. In Proverbs 10:19, it's one of my favorite verses. It talks about the one who restrains his lips is prudent, but when there are many words, sin is unavoidable. So the more opportunity I speak, the more time, the more words that come out of my mouth, the more opportunity there is for sin, because I'm a broken person with broken thoughts and broken feelings about all other kinds of broken people. And James says that your religion is worthless if you cannot bridle the tongue and in doing so deceive your heart. It sounds harsh, but it reveals a much more prevalent reality in our own lives. Our doing of the word should be displayed in our love for other people, which is exactly what verse 27 says. And not just our love for other people, but our love for those who are most vulnerable in the world. It doesn't say perfect and pure religion that is undefiled before God is solely this, to only visit orphans and only visit widows in their affliction. But orphans and widows are some of the most vulnerable people in the ancient world and still remain so to this day. James says, go out, serve those who lack the ability to help themselves in certain areas of life. And if you can help the least of these, you reveal yourself to be mine. I don't care about your religiosity. I care about your love demonstrated through your faith in me. And you can see that all throughout Christ's life in the Gospels. Read Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, any combination of them, and see how Jesus lived his life, and see if he cared more about religious practice than he did for loving your neighbor. And you come back and tell me which one shows up more. Pure religion is love in action, and not only is it love in action, but it's a public display of love in action, and it's the private display of keeping ourselves unstained from the world. Unstained from the world. The more we rub shoulders with contamination, the easier it is to be contaminated. And the more we're outside of the Word, and the Word is not in us, the easier it is to believe the lies of the world. If you are a believer and you follow Jesus Christ and you say that His Word is truth, then you ought to embed yourself in the truth. Because simply hearing the truth is a self-delusion. We have to do what the Word says. And we know it. We know that. It's so simple. Do the Word. All right, yeah. But we just simply fail to do it. Here's what we're going to conclude with. James in his letter has this primary emphasis on the need for spiritual maturity. I won't say attacks, but he goes at the immaturity of the Jews that are dispersed throughout all the areas in this letter, and he desires them to grow in their relationship and faith in Jesus Christ. I'm sure I've said it in sermons before. I expect my toddler to behave like a toddler. It's cute when he's 2. It's not cute when he's 50. There should be a path of growth in the person's life. Maybe many of us have spent years and years within the church, but we haven't really seen a lot of growth from the time that we were 40 to the time that we were 60, or from the time that you were 20, from the time that you were 30. And I would imagine if you could go back and self-evaluate and reflect on reasons as to why you haven't seen a lot of growth, how was your Bible reading time doing? What was your prayer life like? How much of an emphasis did you put on loving other people and loving God? See, what happens is we know grace, and grace is the greatest message in the Bible, and I'll preach grace until I die, because that's what truly sets us free. The law of liberty, the gospel, it is God's grace on display, but we often use grace as a scapegoat to growth, rather than grace being the fuel for our growth. And what I mean, again, is going back to what I said about me and snarky and rude. Like, well, I'm just a little sassy. Maybe God made me that way. I'm just a bit of a loudmouth. It's just kind of who I am. It's this idea, like, I know I seem like an angry person, but have you seen how stupid other people are? I mean, really. And these whole, just the way I am line of thinking is a scapegoat to growth, because they fail, because what we're really trying to say is that nothing is really wrong with me enough that warrants changing. And if I see in the Bible, in James, that he tells me I need to focus more intently on listening to what people have to say, but I continually don't care about what you have to say, and just chalk it up to that, it's difficult for me to empathize. I've used grace as a scapegoat rather than the fuel for growth. The good news is, in all of this, because it sounds weighty, and it is that God's gospel is bigger and His grace is stronger than all of your mistakes currently and previously and in your future. He loves you. He demonstrated His love for you, that He died for you. That while you were a sinner, while you still struggle with all of these things, while you neglect pure religion for the sake of religiosity, He still loves you and wants you to grow and be nourished in Him and His Word. He doesn't forsake you for the fact that you're weak. He just wants you to grow. The pursuit of growth is fueled by grace. We can't just write ourselves off. I'm just too broken. You're not. True faith in the Lord Jesus Christ is proven by the works that we do in His name. And because of His great love for us on the cross, we ought to desire nothing else than to pursue righteousness and obedience to Him and His Word.